Kia ora, I'm Anke Richter, who wrote the bestseller Cult Trip, and I'm bringing you an exciting event. Australasia, get ready for Decult 2024, the first cult awareness conference in New Zealand, happening in Christchurch this October. Are you worried about a friend or family member who's in a group that may be causing them harm, or do you have your own story? Then join us for a weekend with experts from around the world, where those who've left cultic groups can share their experiences and meet professionals who can help them. Head to our website decult.net for all the info. Come cult-proof your life at Decult 2024.
This is Beyond BJU, Exposing Fundamentalism. I'm your host, Andrew Pledger, and I'm a survivor of Bob Jones University. BJU is a fundamentalist college with its roots in white supremacy and is known for its culture of indoctrination, conformity, and control. Its influence extends beyond its campus, impacting Christian schooling, politics, biblical counseling, and evangelical Christianity. The school serves as a hub for churches, schools, and camps, and these institutions perpetrate its abusive teachings and practices. This show explores these areas of influence and amplifies the stories of those who have been impacted by Bob Jones University. This is Beyond BJU, Exposing Fundamentalism. Hello, everyone. Yes, here is another episode with the amazing Dr. Camille Lewis. And in this episode, she discusses 5 things that BJU does not want you to know. And we really get a lot more into the nitty-gritty specific details of Bob Jones Sr. I found this conversation so fascinating, as I have with all of my conversations with Dr. Lewis. But what I really loved about this is, in the research that I've done, I've just never seen these examples, these stories. And of course, Dr. Camille Lewis knows it because she's been researching it for over 15 years. But I don't want to keep you waiting any longer, but enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. I am so happy to have Dr. Camille Lewis on the show today. If you listen to Surviving BJU, you heard her incredible story and her expertise surrounding Bob Jones University. And I'm so happy to have her back on to dig so much deeper into that. And I've been looking forward so much to this conversation. But thank you so much, Camille, for coming on the show today.
I'm happy to. I'm always happy to talk with you about all this fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. And for people who aren't familiar, could you do a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Camille Lewis, and I graduated from Bob Jones in 1990 with a bachelor's in English, and then in 1992 with what they called then master's in public speaking. And then I taught there from 1992 to 2007 with a 4-year break for my Ph.D. at Indiana University. So I was in the speech department, taught rhetoric and public speaking and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And so what I'm really excited to really get into today is Bob Jones Sr., which is something I didn't dig super deeply into the Surviving Bob Jones. We covered it in the very first episode, and he was mentioned throughout. But there were even things, as I learned about him, I was just seeing red flags, just seeing from such a young age of how he was able to gather a group of people and get them together. He had this draw just from I think from 12 years old, I think.
That's the myth.
That's the myth? The myth. Okay. Got you.
I've been researching the roots of Bob Jones College and Bob Jones University, of course, as a result, for now 13 years. And I have a manuscript. I have a book-length manuscript that is being reviewed by University Press right now. So that will come later. I've gathered 5 facts about Bob Jones Sr. that I discovered in the last decade that BJU doesn't want you to know. That are really, some of them are simple, really obvious, and some of them took a lot of digging. So the first one is about his dad. And I'm really embarrassed by my alma mater for not just looking a little bit deeper on this. His dad claimed that he fought at Chickamauga, which is this great big battle in the Civil War, a big Confederate victory. Bob Jones repeated that. Bob Jones biographers repeat that. So R.K. Johnson repeats it. Dan Turner repeats it. Terry Rood repeats it. This just keeps getting told over and over, and it's absolutely false. He was not at Chickamauga. He fought for the 37th Alabama, and he was in Mississippi during that battle, which is not that big of a deal, but it's such an easy thing to look up. Why are we repeating that lie? It puffed him up, I'm sure, but he wasn't there, and we shouldn't be repeating that. And every time, at every turn, as I was researching, there was another lie. And that really bothered me. Why are we repeating the lies? So the second thing is about his sister. Bob Jones was born 4.5 months after his next oldest sibling.
Oh, yeah. And what year was Bob Jones Sr. born?
Bob Jones was born in 1883, October 30th, 1883. And his sister, Exie Ann, was born June 1883. We heard about his birthday so much. I know it as well as I know my own dad's birthday. It was just something that was repeated. But I'm going to say it again. Bob Jones Sr. was born 4.5 months. This is based on the documented records. 4.5 months after his next oldest sibling. So what that means is that he and his sister did not come from the same woman. That's all we can know for sure. I think because Exie Ann was named after her father, Alexander, and her mother, Georgia Ann, I think she's the one that was born from Georgia. And that's a hunch. I don't have documentation on that. And Bob's older sister, 18 years older than he, died right around the time he was born. So I think it's probably something like that was going on, that he is actually a grandchild in some way. Okay. So that's my hunch, but I don't know. There's something shady going on in the family. I have constructed the documents for you to have that if you'd like to share that.
Oh, thank you. I'll happily share that.
Because that's complicated. Number 3, his grades in college were awful.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew, they're awful. His first.
And what college did he attend?
Okay, so he attended, it was Southern University, which was in Greensboro, Alabama, which is closed now. It folded with Birmingham Southern.
And what years did he attend?
He attended 1901 was his first, the fall of 1901 was his first semester, and he attended until fall of 2004. He quit after that. So I have his transcript. I have it in the table here. I'm going to share that with you. Just suffice it to say, his first semester in English, which was, so it was like our EN 101 or whatever, he earned a 47%.
Oh, wow.
That's really bad.
Yeah. Now,
he did go on the next semester, he did get a 74. But in Latin, he got a 21%. This is the final grade, 21%. Mathematics 2, he got a 51%. In physics, he got a 40%. This is just not the kind of person that usually starts a university.
Okay, this is interesting to me. Oh my gosh.
bad grades. They're not.
Wow.
And now that if I were his academic advisor, I would probably say, honestly, say to him, I think you need to go to the accommodations office and maybe get some help because maybe you have a problem reading comprehension. Those are the kinds of things so that might have been what was going on. We don't ever hear about this. He got a 60% in geometry, and that was remedial geometry. He got a 55% in algebra, remedial algebra.
Oh my God.
It's bad.
Wow.
And I've got the document here for you to see it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that is interesting to me because I remember when I was, and obviously you've done so much more research than me, but I remember when I was doing some research that he would try to surround himself with people who could help run the university.
He could borrow brains, but not borrow. You could borrow brains, but you can't borrow character. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And so he was the face of it. It was named after him.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So he had to puff up. He had to have swagger because he certainly didn't have the wherewithal, the intellectual wherewithal to back it up.
Something that is so interesting to me that I've been just learning as I'm just researching cults and cult leaders is something I hear a lot is that these leaders, they don't have the skills to do things on their own. And they learn to manipulate people and to have their little minions do all these things because without them, they couldn't make it on their own. Yeah. They would be absolutely helpless. And that was something that kind of surprised me as I've heard that through different interviews with different people talking about cult leaders. For example, I've been watching the documentary Escaping Twin Flames Universe, which is just on Netflix.
That. I saw the first episode.
Yes, me too. I'm only one episode in. Yeah. And I've also listened to a podcast about it too.
Okay.
And just hearing them talk about how he just had all these failed things before then turning into this cult leader and providing all these answers, bringing all these people together, bringing this sense of community, this purpose, this structure, giving you these answers for simple things, and having the personality, the charisma, or even like the authoritarian tendencies.
Oh, yeah.
To make people think that you are right. Again, like there's a quote about like I don't remember it, I'm paraphrasing it, but it's like you can tell a lie over and over and people will believe it so confidently in it. And we've seen that with Trump, most definitely, sadly. Same personality.
Absolutely.
Oh, but anyways, sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
No, that's fine. No, that's good. And he did his last semester. Let me get it up here. He did get an A- in speech.
Okay, but that doesn't surprise me.
Exactly. But at the same time, again, he's failing math and physics. And Bible, he did okay in Bible. He got B's and C's in Bible.
Oh, okay.
I'll give him that. But no, he's not very. Now, and Mary Gaston only had a 9th grade education. As much as they brag about how smart she was and what a great cultural influence, that's another story. I wasn't going to get into that, but she only had a 9th grade education.
Okay, got you.
The first person in the Jones family to earn an accredited master's degree was Fannie Mae Jones. And she has a Master of Science from Colorado State. And I've read her thesis, and it's a legitimate degree. Hard sciences and everything.
Yeah.
Bob Jr. always joked he tried to say she got her master's in angel food cake, which was a lie. No, she did a real scientific experiment with guinea pigs. Literal. I know. That's funny, because you've got a guinea pig.
I do have a guinea pig.
She took guinea pigs and fed them potatoes to see how much vitamin C they would get from it. If it was a boiled potato or a baked potato. Seriously, that's
funny. For people who wouldn't understand, because you tried to explain the Bob Jones family tree in the beginning.
Okay, so the very, very beginning, Bob's ancestors came over through Charleston, which is pretty typical. Now, R.K. Johnson and Dan Turner claim that they came for religious freedom. It looks pretty obvious that they were patriarch of the family, had been sentenced to transportation, which is an old-fashioned phrase for saying you committed a crime and you get a choice. You can either go to jail or you can go to the colonies. And he chose the colonies. There's one record that says that he probably stole, and it's fuzzy, but he probably stole all the iron in someone's house, and that's why he was sentenced to transportation. So the doorknobs and hinges and such. So he came through Charleston. He, Henry Jones, had 3 boys, or somewhere he had 3 boys. They might have come with him. He contracted yellow fever and he died, and they all went into the Charleston Orphan House, which is a big feature in Charleston. And then one of them went to Columbia College. One of them went to the State College. One of them went to a carpenter in Charleston. Sass was his name. And the third was indentured. These were all indentured servitude to a man who's buried right over here in Greer at Milford Church Baptist, James Nolan. And that was Bob's ancestor. And then they just floated. He was a carpenter, a legitimate carpenter. By the time we get to Alex, which is actually his full name is William Alex Jones, he was just a ne'er-do-well, is probably the nicest way of putting it. He was a big talker because he was bragging about Chickamauga, but he wasn't there. And he was very poor. I've seen his will that he left because his wife, Georgia, died. And then he remarried a woman named Nancy. So she got his pension from the Civil War. And you can see he died with $30 worth. His estate was worth $30. So it was just sad. And Bob was the second from the end child to be born and the first child to not be born after a family, to not be named after a family member, which is interesting. He had here, I have it here for you. His family, if you look, his oldest brother, Jimmy, was at one point he said he died of alcoholism. He died at 18. Then there's Lou. We can't find where Lou's buried. We've looked everywhere. Then his sister named Dorothy Alabama. They called her Dolly Bama. She was conceived when her dad was on furlough from Vicksburg. See, I'm going on and on. She's born in 1864. Then they've got 6 girls in a row. There's Lou, Dolly, Hoda, Georgia, Ella, and Amanda. Finally, you get Thomas. And Thomas does live till he's 53. He was a police officer. Bob said he was the mayor of the town. That's not true. Then we have O.C. She married a future board member. Then Exie. So you've got all these girls, and the boys kept dying. I mean, well, they were not alive. That's another reason I think that Bob was probably not a legitimate parentage, because he's a boy and Alex wants to keep him. And then he's got a brother after him named Richard Albert, also not named after any family member. And he ended up being a Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, wow.
He was an evangelist for the JWs. Nobody talks about that either.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. He divorced his wife, and he was really not a really very savory character. But anyway,
so
I'm going on and on again.
It's all good. I love it. How many siblings total did Bob Jones Sr. have?
Wow, 12 kids, and he was second from the end.
Wow.
And that's pretty typical for folks. They just have a baby every 2 years.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical. But Georgia was born in 1841. So and he was born in 1883. So she was 42 by the time he was born. That's possible. That's very possible that a woman has a baby at 42. It's possible. You might think. It's possible.
Yeah, I got you.
But you can't have 2 babies 4.5 months apart. That
cannot.
is impossible. That I think that's kind of answers your question about his family. Another thing that's strange is that his sisters die all very young. We don't know how old Lou was when she died.
Do you know the causes of death?
No. See, they didn't give death certificates in Alabama till 1909. It's gone. Hoda died at 19. Lou died at 1920. Georgia died at 19. Ella died at 27. She had been married, though. Amanda died at 28. She was married. But 3 of the girls whose I have no marriage record for died at 18 or 19 or 20. So that's strange. It gives the impression of maybe childbirth, but there's no evidence.
Yeah. And then remind me, who are the parents of all these kids then?
That's William Alexander Jones and Georgia Ann Creel Jones.
Okay.
Georgia Ann's dad, by the way, was put in I can't remember the name of it, the mental institution in Alabama, right around the time she got married. And it's a mystery why that happened. We don't know.
Yeah.
There's no, I don't have the record.
Yeah. What, from your research, what was Bob Jones Sr. like growing up?
I have a letter that a woman, a missionary, a Methodist missionary from Vermont wrote home. And she was at Bob Jones High School after he was there, but she still describes, I think, accurately what it was like in that place. The poverty cannot be imagined. He was extremely poor. You hear Dolly Parton talk about her impoverished childhood. It's the same, just in Alabama. He didn't have, let me put it this way. At that time, there was a movement among the working class farmers like his dad called the Farmers Alliance. And it was very important for these men to keep the money that their crops earned, to keep it local. Totally makes sense. And so these Farmers Alliance people were trying to teach other farmers how to make good decisions about their farms and about their communities. Alex was very active in the Farmers Alliance. And the Alabama Farmers Alliance was more prolific in its newspapers than any other state, even more than Texas. Texas is huge. So it was a very there's a lot of documents. That's the only reason I can do any of this is because there's all these newspapers all over the state. He ran for office in the Farmers Alliance, vice president, I believe it was. So he was active in that. And they believed very strongly that the way to keep the money local was to keep their kids educated. So they wanted them to be able to read and so that they could vote properly, because the rich folks were making fun of the working class farmers for being stupid. Because of that, he probably, and all his kids learned, according to the censuses, did know how to read and write. Georgia didn't know how to write. She knew how to read, but he made sure that all his kids knew how to read and write. So when the fast-talking Hammett, Charles Jefferson Hammett, came into town, who was a Sunday school salesman, he sold Sunday school literature, Alex was probably mystified by he was a Northerner, he was an elocutionist, he knew how to schmooze. And so Alex got dollar signs in his eyes when he saw that maybe there was a possibility that Bob could go to high school. And so he did through that avenue, because he stayed with Mr. Hammett. He stayed in his house. He took care of his kids. He took care of Hammett's mother-in-law while he went to school. So that's a rough life. It is a rough life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I do have his first address, which was on January 2nd, 1896, for the Farmers Alliance in the drugstore. They were having a little kid, like a little speech contest. And he was 12 years old, and that was his first speech. It wasn't a gospel sermon. It was a sermon for politics.
Okay, interesting.
See, it had nothing to do with religion. He was arguing for populism for the Farmers Alliance. And that I do have a lot on that in my book, and then a lot I cut too, but a lot in my book.
Uh-huh. And then when did religion come to the mix for him?
Okay, so he went to Southern University, which is a Methodist school for ministers, in September 1901. The 1900 census has him listed. He lists himself both as a teacher. 1900 in the census, he lists himself as a teacher, and then he gets listed twice, which is very strange. as a teacher and as a preacher in Barber County. So he sees himself as that in June of 1900. And then in that September, he's going to go to Southern University and began his education to become a minister in the Methodist Episcopal Church.
Mm-hmm. So he struggles through college.
Yeah.
And then what happens when he gets out?
His peers tease him a lot about, it's funny, if you look at the newspapers, or that's more like a magazine that the student body published, you see them teasing him about the girl he's dating, about going to psychics or mediums, they call them then, about using his money poorly. He's not that well respected or that admired.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can collect those jokes, but they're teasing him. Something. I wish I could go back in a time machine and find out what it was that he was acting like there. But you know how it is, a kid with bad grades and he's just still hanging around. Greensboro was close, that's the Methodist school, and it was fairly close to Union, which is where Judson College was. So and that's a Baptist women's college. So there's Greensboro is where the Methodist preachers school is, and the Baptist women's college is close. And so they would do a lot of social events together on purpose. That's how the colleges would plan those kinds of social events. And that's the jokes that are in there, is that he's with a Judson girl.
And then who was his first wife?
That was my fourth. I can't remember what number I'm on. That was my fifth point. I'll jump down. So his first wife was Bernice Sheffield, and I have her yearbook. They gave it to me. I went to Judson College to do research, and they just gave it to me. They said, we have extras here. And so I have it, her senior yearbook. And she's lovely. I'll show you her picture. I'll give it to you. She's this lovely picture. Looks like a typical Gibson girl, which is the way women looked in the time period. She graduated in 1905 with a bachelor's in literature. And there's so much mythology around her. Turner says that she was a terrific pianist and she played for him. No, she did take piano. I've got that. She did take piano lessons, but she was like on a sophomore level. It was pretty basic. Her peers tease her too about all the boys she's dating. So I don't know if they're saying the opposite. I don't know what they're saying, but they're teasing her too, that she's just a flirt is what they're calling her.
Mm-hmm. And so how do they meet?
Probably one of these mixers,
okay.
Between the two colleges, which makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
They want the preacher boys to marry, or the ministers to marry the nice, good Judson girls. She graduated in May of 2005, and 10 months later, which is ominous, she dies. There's no evidence that she was with him at any point, meaning in his evangelism. After he left school, he evangelized like crazy. And I have every place where he was. He had a new place every 2 weeks. But he all of a sudden she is never appearing. She never is in the newspaper. Which is odd to me. She died 10 months after. She arrived, I have the notes here. She arrived in Birmingham on a Wednesday afternoon in September. The newspaper says she's critically ill. And she was sent to a private hospital run by a Dr. Brown. His name is George Summers Brown. Dr. Brown graduated from the University of Michigan. And his specialty, he taught at the medical school in Birmingham, which was a kind of a known medical school. Now it's University of Alabama. He was the first professor of obstetrics at this Birmingham medical school, which is curious for a person who died 10 months after she was married.
Yeah.
Critically ill. After she died, that was on Wednesday. She died Friday morning. Right after she died, there's a little snippet in the newspaper, which they probably got from Bob Jones himself, that said she died of tuberculosis. There's a historian who did his master's with Clemson, and he claims that she was at a TB sanitarium in Birmingham. False. There was no TB sanitarium in 1906. That's not true. She was at this hospital with Dr. Brown. There's a lot of fiction about her death. The reason I'm skeptical about tuberculosis is it usually takes a couple years to die from tuberculosis if you're going to die. It's a chronic problem. It doesn't happen really fast. And if she had tuberculosis, she would not have married. That was a rule in that time, that the only reason the person married was to have children. And if you're not going to be there to be raising those children, it would not be fair to them to get married. A person with TB did not marry. She wouldn't have gone to school in a boarding house, boarded for college either, because she would have infected everybody. So I'm very skeptical about that conclusion. I think probably she died of something very ordinary. I don't think she was pregnant. I don't think she died in childbirth, even though Brown was an obstetrics, because usually those women didn't die in the hospital. They usually died at home. So I don't think it was that. I think she had pneumonia. I think she was something very boring. And he glamorized it by saying it was, because at the time, dying from TB was the fashionable thing. Weird, but
yeah, I don't understand.
I know I could send you an article on that. It's just bizarre, but it was chic because it made you skinny and pitiful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I don't think she died of TB. I think he created that. There's no announcement for her funeral in her local newspaper. There's no announcement of her. There's an obit in her local newspaper. That's strange.
Yeah.
That's very strange. The only obit was published in a Methodist. She's Baptist. It was published in a Methodist paper 7 weeks later in New Orleans, way far away from her home. Which leads me to another interesting thing. Here's what happened. So she dies on a Friday. She's probably buried on Saturday because that's usually how they usually bury people quick. The next Sunday, 2 days after she died, he's out doing a big evangelistic crusade in Alabama, Floral, Alabama. And then he's in Enterprise in Alabama. And he's hopping everywhere. And then he claims he's sick. If you look at Turner and Johnson, they both say he's got tuberculosis of the throat, which sounds fake, but that was a thing then. He's going to die. He's going to go out west to die. He did go out west, but he didn't go out west to die, clearly. He was preaching 4 weeks later in Butte, Montana. Never mentioned his wife again. Not a word about her. They did talk to him in Montana, and he said, "Oh, my singer just died. My singer Gilreath just died." No, he was alive. I don't know why he lied. There's more lies. I don't know why he's lying. I don't know why he doesn't just say, "My wife died." I think there's something he's ashamed about, and I don't know what it is. So there's something suspicious about all that. I think I do have her obit, but again, it's so strange.
Yeah, that is.
The whole thing is so very strange. The other fact is about his ordination. Johnson and Turner both claim, like you said at the beginning, that he was this child preacher who was starting churches out of brush arbors. And the first church he had was the church he started. No.
Thank you for pointing that out, because I put that on the Surviving BJU podcast because I thought it was true.
You're just repeating the facts, meaning as they're presented.
Yeah, I didn't know.
So the first church that he had, which was in let me write it down. I got it written down. The Mariana district, I think. Yeah, Mariana district was founded 3 years before he was born. The Methodists keep meticulous notes. All of this is out there. If you just look, the part of the problem with all these Bob Jones histories is that people just assume that the leader is telling the truth. So you have Turner and Johnson and, dare I say it, John Matsko, who just assume that the leader is telling the truth and they just go right to the leader. But you've got to go to other sources because he's not telling the truth. He's a pathological liar. So here's the deal. Okay, so in 1900, for the year 1901, He is listed as a pulpit supply in the Mariana district, which means he's a warm body filling a pulpit when they don't have anybody else to do it. That's it. That's not an ordination. Then in 1903, so 3 years later, he's a local ordained deacon. Now, what that means is he can work in this one church. That's it. This is in Selma. Okay, so the Selma district, which is where his second wife was from. Yes. So he can only stay there, and he is an ordained deacon. That means that he can marry and preach, but he can't do communion. And he can only do those if nobody else is available. Still, not really, or not a reverend yet. By 1907, he is an ordained elder, and that's when he could be called officially a reverend. And for the next 2 years, he's listed as a reverend. He's technically a reverend for 3 years. That's it. He's still local. He can't go to other churches and do this. But then by 1910, Methodists aren't calling him reverend anymore, and now he's just a local elder, not ordained. And then he's demoted to local preacher. And the last time he's mentioned is in 1932, and that's when he's just not ordained. He's Mr. Jones, and he's a local preacher. So he was never in full connection in the Methodist Church, which is a big deal. To get to full connection, if you look at the records, it's like graduating. You're a freshman, you're a sophomore, you're a junior, you're a senior, and the school wants to get you out. That's the goal. The Methodists want to get you in full connection, unless you got to work to get disconnected or to get unconnected. And he didn't make it. He didn't graduate, if you will, to full connection. So he was only ordained technically for 3 years. And that's it. And all that fiction about him. There's no evidence. He did speak, but he spoke like a little kid in Sunday school for a pageant. That's not preaching.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so what do you think happened with him suddenly not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. Let me just put it that. I have a hunch. They did not like his political activism. That was often the criticism. He was always politically active. He preached politics often, even when he was technically preaching the gospel, so-called. He was preaching politics. The Methodists are very square. They're very nerdy. They're very prim about that. And you don't mix politics with the ministry. They wanted the political stump, and the pulpit to be separate, which sounds good to me. I'm all for that. So
me too.
Yeah, he wouldn't obey, and so that's what it had nothing to do with orthodoxy or all that crap he made up. That was just a fiction he created.
All right, and so then, of course, like he founds Bob Jones College, and then there's a university which loves having religion and politics.
Oh God, all the time. Doesn't it make sense? See, that forgets me. When you see that, you're like, oh, of course he's this way. For me, at least.
It does make sense.
Yeah. So the circumstances around his starting Bob Jones College, there was a school in Montgomery, a Methodist women's college, that was right in his neighborhood. He has had a gorgeous house, by the way, on Ridge Avenue. It was pretty. And he had subdivided it in such a way that there were apartments in there, which is weird. But anyway, gorgeous house in Cloverdale, very lovely house. And right by him was this Methodist women's college. And Hammett, Charles Jefferson Hammett, the guy who was his high school principal, he had started a school down in Panama City, Florida, too. And I think he just started to get a little jealous. He liked that way, that new power he could wield. Also, his son had just graduated from the military academy there in Montgomery. And at the same time, Billy Sunday's sons were embarrassing him. This was all happening at the same time. Billy Sunday's sons were terrible people. And I think Bob wanted to keep Bob Jr. close and not send him off somewhere where he might embarrass him and ruin his reputation. So I think all of those things, does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm
And
not
then
being-
he wanted that power too, it sounds like, because
Oh, yeah.
his colleagues
Yeah.
were starting their
Yeah.
own school.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I guess I want to go back a little bit. Bob Jones Sr. got married another woman and then had Bob Jones Jr. Did they
Right,
have
Mary Gaston. Yeah.
Mary Gaston? He married Mary Gaston.
Yeah.
Oof, which one of the women's dorms is
Right.
named after. Oh my God. And I think we have a Creole. What's
Yeah,
Creole?
George A. Creole. Yeah, that's his mom.
That's his mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And then Grace Haight is a former faculty member. Margaret Mack was a big donor, or her husband was. Nell Sunday was Billy Sunday's wife. I don't know if you knew that.
Okay, I wondered about that.
And Siddons was Mary Gaston's mom.
Okay, I see. And so how many children did Bob Jones Sr. have with Mary Gaston, his second wife? Just Bob Jones Jr. Okay, gotcha. I thought so. Okay, wow. Interesting.
That's an interesting, because
isn't that
keeps
rare? Isn't that
he
rare in
keeps
that time?
preaching everywhere that you got to have lots of kids. But when he's in his own hometown and he heads, we should have lots of kids, and they all know he's got one. You can hear him hedging a little bit. A feeling that Mary Gaston, her family, the stolen works were really important in Alabama. That's another story. I didn't even put that in my notes.
What's this?
Okay. Yeah, gotta sit down for this one. Okay, the earliest stolen work moved from Germany to Paris at the beginning of the 18th century. He was a well-known clockmaker. One of his clocks is in the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. I can show you a picture of it. It's really gorgeous. It's 9 feet tall. It's huge. And his sons, and I'm going to probably mess this up because he named them all Pierre. There's Pierre Francois, Pierre Michel, Pierre Chevalier. So I'm going to get them all mixed up. His sons were born in Paris and they wanted to go find their fortune. So they went to Saint Domingue, or what we call Haiti now. And they were all slavers. They had, I can't remember if it was coffee and sugar. I can't remember what crop they had. The standard for enslavement in the French colonies was governed by the Code Noir, which is the most brutal slavery code ever. It's awful. And that couldn't last. That kind of brutality could not last. And by the end of the 18th century, the Haitian Revolution began. And that was the only revolution during that time. So we had the American Revolution, French Revolution, and Haitian Revolution. Only the Haitian Revolution confronted white supremacy. And boy, did they. The stories are rampant about when the white French people left. You have the story of, I can't remember her name. I know her daughter's name, but I can't remember her name. She was 16 years old, this matriarch of the family, left in little silk slippers with her little silk gown on the rocks as she's walking to a ship, carrying her newborn, or I think a baby was 6 months old, her infant in her arms, walking to a ship that Napoleon sent to rescue the white people from the black people getting their freedom. So she arrived on that boat with her baby and with the stolen works. They all went up so there's all these French people. They went up to Philadelphia. The matriarch of the stolen works died of yellow fever in the harbor. They were in quarantine. And eventually what happened is that mother and her daughter married 2 stolen work brothers. So that's really complicated if you're laying out the family tree. The baby, the little girl, Amy, married Louis August stolen work. He got shot in a duel on the streets of Greensboro. They lived in Greensboro. All the stolen work men, when they arrived in Alabama, they did attend the same college that Bob Jones Sr. attended. So he saw their pictures because they funded the Southern University through the Civil War. They arrived in Greensboro because they got an idea that they could grow French crops in Alabama. So they asked the government, so it was the enslavers and the Bonapartists, the ex-soldiers that were exiled, pleaded with the federal government to give us some land. So they sold them some acreage for a song there in Greensboro. They started a colony called the Vine and Olive Colony. And there they were out in their capes and their silk gowns with their little silk shoes trying to grow French olives and French grapes. And it was a complete disaster. None of it worked. The climate was wrong. They didn't know what they were doing. They thought because they were French, they could just manage it. Louis Auguste had Eugene. Eugene married Estelle Siddons. They had 3 kids, Henry, Mary Gaston, and Jack. Mary Gaston was named after her aunt and uncle, her double aunt and double uncle, by the way. And when she was 5 years old, her dad died by suicide. And Estelle went back to live with her parents because she had this little 5-year-old girl. I think Jack was 3. Henry was a little older. So she's 5. That's a really big deal. So her dad, Estelle's dad, was a very good lawyer, ran for public office a few times. And so that's all of that stuff landing on this little 5-year-old girl, all the Code Noir, there's several attempts at finding their own fortune, all of that. And then her dad's death by suicide. That's a lot, I think.
Yeah.
And nobody tells that story. She had headaches. I know that Junior says she had headaches in her youth. She went to Kellogg's Sanitarium up in Battle Creek, Michigan, right before she got married. That's another story. But anyway, sorry. I told you I would talk all day.
No, it's all good. It's fascinating. And so what year did Bob Jones Sr. and Mary Gaston get married?
'08.
So 1908.
Yeah, I'm fairly sure it's '08. Let me double check that. It might be. Junior's born in 11.
1911. Okay.
Yeah. Need to double check. Yes, June. She had a nice June wedding, 1908, in her grandparents' living room.
Wow. Okay. And then I'm really curious because you talked a little bit about some hunches you had about why the competition that Bob Jones Sr. had to start the college, but also to keep his son close, Junior, and also so he couldn't embarrass him. But do you think he also, because it did struggle in the beginning a lot.
Oh boy.
It was a struggle. Yeah. And so really, I want to dig a bit into really, what do you think Bob Jones Sr.'s reasons for founding? We talked a little bit about his son and the competition, but what were did he have theological reasons? Did he actually believe what he preached, do you think? Or
I think if you look at what he preached, I do think he believed that. But he did believe that the solution for America was to have conservative politics, which is the same as conservative evangelicalism for him, be in power. And the way to get that is by training young people in 100% Americanism. He would use that phrase often, which was code for the Ku Klux Klan. But that's another conversation I will tell you after I get the book done, published.
I got you. Yeah. Because I know Bob Jones Sr. had connections with the KKK. Mm-hmm. And I know you can't say much about that now. And there was a dormitory at Bob Jones University. Bibb Graves' dorm. Yeah. Who was Bibb Graves?
Bibb Graves was governor of Alabama in 26. I think he was elected. I can't remember. It was right before. It might have been 25. He was governor for a long time there, and he was, as governors go, he fixed the roads. They loved him for that, but he was a doofus. And he was the grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in the state. That's absolute. Everybody knows that. That's well documented. We know that. That's no surprise that I say that. We know that. And that Stephen Jones decided to just secretly take the name off and put up Harry Ironside. Well, you got to repent, Stephen. You can't just make things disappear. I need to repent. We all need to repent of those sins.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And yeah, from really what I was like researching for the Surviving BJU podcast, there was like this strong fear of just change that was happening. And Bob Jones.
It's a little bit of a fake fear in the sense that,
yeah.
for instance, they're afraid when he was in, he would make up these things that are going on that immigrants are taking over. Just like we've got now. Immigrants are going to take over, and someday it's going to be like Mexico here, he would say. We're going to have bulls running down the street, just like in Mexico. And it's not, yes, he's afraid of change. It's not a legitimate fear. He's afraid of Al Smith as a Catholic. He was afraid of, but I think he was using those fears to keep himself the hero of his own story.
I see. Yeah, there are all these things to be afraid of, but he would save you from this. He would.
Oh, yes. He's always the hero in every sermon. So I found in his sermons, in one newspaper in Marshall, Texas, transcribed every one of his sermons in 1924 in the spring. He preached 6 weeks. There are 42 sermons. The morning and the afternoon paper each transcribed them. So I had 2 witnesses, complete transcripts. So I can see what he preached and when he preached it over those 6 weeks. And he's the subject of the sentence more often than anything else. Not Jesus, not God, Bob.
Wow.
And that isn't legit. That's a personality disorder.
That's narcissistic personality disorder.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's megalomania. That is not.
That's the thing. A lot of cult leaders, not all, but a lot of them they're narcissists. Like
only that makes it that's the only it makes sense. That's the only explanation that I can figure out.
Yeah, and so what was Bob Jones Sr. involvement with the school? Like, he was the president, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, founder and president, and he was the mover and shaker until he died in January 68. I'm thinking, January 16th, 1968. He was always a force, and he has. What did I say? Where did I just read something about his? I can't remember who this was from. I guess it was Mary Gaston was saying that in his advanced years, I think it was Mary Gaston, that he had dementia.
Yeah. And
that's
something that is interesting to me too with narcissist is they'll pump themselves up to be this incredible, amazing person. Like you said, he made himself the hero of his story or whatever in all these sermons, but they don't have the receipts to back up their claims of why they're so great or why they're so incredible.
No. You should not have started the university, mister. You did not have the credibility or the grades to start a university, period. He had his name on everything. Bob Jones Tabernacle, Bob Jones Fellowship Clubs, Bob Jones Hymn Book. It was on everything. So Bob Jones Choir.
And when I was doing my research, like there were some things where like I can't remember what it was. Someone claimed that he didn't really want that, but I didn't believe that for a second.
No. That's fiction.
I don't believe that for a second.
Because it was on everything.
Yeah,
and already, and that again, every tabernacle was named after him. And I don't know if those tabernacles were these temporary things that they would erect in a field somewhere. The one in Montgomery was right across the street from the birthplace of the Confederacy, which is strange. Anyway, and right across another street from the church where Martin Luther King Jr. pastored.
Oh, okay. So yes. So he has this history of failing in a lot of areas, and he then paints himself as a hero of his own story, and he has a history of not being liked at all. But he somehow figures out a way to draw people to him through his evangelizing, and then to Bob Jones College and then university.
those early faculty members, I've researched some of those early faculty members, and after, he had a way of finding smart people who had gone through something tragic. And I think he flattered them. I just think he just love bombed them. For instance, Ruth Flood her dad died shortly before he convinced her to join up. Eunice Hutto Morlock was similar. I think it was her dad also died. And she was a smart lady. She was a very smart lady, but he really knew how to flatter. I don't know if you ever got that. I remember that especially when we were very young and didn't know diddly divided by squat. There was a lot of flattery that made you think that they like me. They want me here. This is where I belong. I am loved. Love bombing. It was a love bomb. I know it. And I know he did that. Because that's the only reason those people would have done that. So yeah, there's a lot of abuse in his wake. A lot.
And what can you talk about? What aspects can you talk about then?
I have a story that I got from, it was the 30s, I believe. No, 1940. It was written by a faculty member. She had to use anonymous terms, but she describes what it was like for now Schuler, who was a student at Bob Jones University. Okay, so Robert Schuler, Fightin' Bob Schuler, was a Methodist evangelist or pastor in Los Angeles. And he had 3 sons, and his youngest son would sometimes preach in chapel when I was there, Robert Schuler. Ugh, it was awful. But anyway. Sorry. He was terrible. He was the preacher that when he preached, everybody would go forward. He would just make this altar call in such a way that the whole congregation was at the front. Anyway, that was just dumb. So his daughter was just abused in the dorms. And this is 1940. So it was always going on. The story of Ruth Flood, oh my goodness, that's a story to be told. And Dan Turner talks about her a little bit. She took this strange 9-month, and that's how he describes it, 9 months leave of absence. Poof, she's gone. And what happened? What happened to her? I've listed it out. I didn't look at it before this, so I can't give a very good summary, but something tragic happened with her, and I don't know what it is. They love bomb you too. Usually you get the yearbook dedicated to you. Brace yourself. You're going to get hit next. There's some tragedy is going to happen. It happens very consistently. So she got I think it was 1938. She got the dedication to the yearbook, and then she got fired or is pushed out. Something. I'll get the details for you because I can't remember them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because in high control groups, love bombing is a big part of how they get you in. Eventually that love bombing ends and you wake up and you see the reality and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm trapped. And everyone else around me is conforming and going along with all of this. No one is speaking up. They're going with the flow, doing what they do, conforming.
Bingo.
And we still see this today at Bob Jones University.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the positive BJU grads, when they think that they can come forward with a loving spirit and want things to change. No, authoritarian institutions, like you don't get a say in anything that they do.
No.
You don't matter to them.
No, you don't matter. Unless you're going to comply, and then you're great. Speak up.
Oh, yeah. Once even with the smallest things, that's what I've been learning. Like, even disagreeing with the smallest things in this environment, like, you're the bad guy now. And I think it's really that narcissism, too. Like, we're the best. Why would you question anything we do or do? Like, we're amazing.
Right. We're making soldiers for Christ, or whatever they're saying now.
I know. It was crazy to me to hear Bob Jones III say they're making soldiers for Christ on Larry King Live. He said that.
They're still repeating that nonsense. Oh, that Larry King Live thing. Did you watch it?
I watched it. I'm going to cut it up into clips and put it online because I'm like, people need to see this.
The interview with Phil Donahue, I have a transcription of it. I don't know if we can get the video of it. That was weird.
What is this interview? Is this around
1983 or 1982? It was right around then, right around the Supreme Court case. And Donahue takes no prisoners. And looking back at it now, you're like, yeah, he's right. Phil's right. And I could get you the transcript. I don't have a recording of it.
Yeah.
At least last
okay,
I looked. But you would, it's eerie. To me, it feels eerie because Donahue nailed it. By the way, now the archives are closed.
Can you dig into that?
All I know is that some historian on Twitter said that he talked to John Matsko, and Matsko confirmed that they were closing them. They had digitized much stuff, he said, but otherwise it was gone, which is really, I don't know. When you don't do that, that's shredding, pulling out the shredder when the FBI is knocking at your door. That's what it feels like.
They're
to me, something.
They're scared. They should be.
Yep.
They should be scared. Oh my God. Yeah. So let's see. So Bob Jones III, let's just say he's a son of Bob Jones Jr. He's, let's say, present 70s. Can you dig into that's when they started allowing African American students, was the early
74.
70s. Oh, 74. Wow.
I think it was 74. And that was they were forced. And it was only married. They would only let married African Americans come.
Okay.
The first African American student was a lady, but they wouldn't let her take the one free class because she was single.
Okay.
Now I can't remember her name. And a faculty member who taught on the missions faculty, Jack Peters was his name. He fought for her to be able to take that one class. And they pushed him out. So that's a typical kind of thing. But anyway, that was in 74 that they allowed married Black students. And then that just tumbled into the Supreme Court case in 83.
And could you explain that case?
That case was the people of the United States versus Bob Jones University and Goldsboro Christian Schools. And BJU and the school in North Carolina joined to say that it was their religious belief that the races could not intermarry. And because they believed that, it's so convoluted, because they believed that dating was only a path to marriage, they couldn't date either. And they claimed that this was part of their religious freedom, that it had nothing to do with prejudice or hate, that it was their religious belief. But that's totally bogus. And I think the Supreme Court saw through that. They lost. They thought that they would, according to the myth that was kicked around Bob Jones, they perceived that the Supreme Court thought for sure they would just allow Black people, but they stood their ground and wrote a check for the taxes that were owed, according to Bob Jones. I don't know if that's true or not. They
see. So after that,
a matter of pride. And then in 2000, they lifted the ban.
Yeah, in the 80s, they lost their tax exempt status because they would not allow interracial dating and marriage, and were very racist around all of that. And they wouldn't lift that ban until 2000. Right.
And the way they enforced it, have you talked to anybody about the way and I have to go by 5 to 3, but I can tell you this. Have you ever heard how they enforced it?
No.
So if you were plainly white, both your parents were white, you were white. If both your parents were Black, you were Black. If both your parents were Asian, you were Asian. Okay, so that was plain. But if you were of mixed racial heritage, then you had to go to a viewing in front of the administration. And a dear friend of mine had to go to this viewing. And it was with Jim Berg and the Dean of Women, Louina Barker. And they were deciding what she looked like. Did she look Asian or did she look white? And they decided, my friend said it was humiliating, mad. And they decided that she looked Polynesian so she could be white. And that was in 92, I think. maybe
Oh
93.
my God.
Now, I know another family who was from the brother and sister who were from the Philippines. And so they're their full brother and sister. And they were judged. I think the man was judged white and the woman was judged Asian. But even though they're full brother and sister, these committees decided opposite. It's not that you made an appeal for one case or another. It was how you looked. And I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I have no idea. It gives me a rash to even think about it. And that went on till 2000. Apparently, they claimed that it was lifted completely in 2000, but then there were rumors that you still had to get parental permission. Now I think it really does. I think they don't care anymore. You would know better than I would.
I'm trying to think because it was full of so many white students. It's always been a predominantly white school.
True.
And while I was there, that was something that they were trying to change so much. I know Pettit was trying to attract African American students.
That's true.
There was this group or this, I don't know.
Yeah, the bridge students.
I think it was called MEETS, this club or something.
Oh, really?
METES.
What
did it stand for? So the organization was called Minorities Empowered to Educate and Serve. And this started at Bob Jones, so I was there.
Educated.
I think so. Or maybe, I'm not sure no.
And empowered to serve.
Yeah, let's see. So yeah, it was Noah Johnson and Johnny Pierre. So Noah Jackson was the president, Johnny Pierre was the vice president. Right. And there were students of color who wanted to start this to, I think, really bring together. And it says it was to cultivate an informed student body to promote understanding and respect between culture and races in order to foster a unified bond.
Wow.
So I remember that happening while I was there. It was a big deal. And there was an article about it in the Collegian
okay.
newspaper or student newspaper about it too.
There it is. I see it now.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yes. So I think there was something that they're trying to do to be like, we're not racist anymore. Look at us. Here's our token little club. Minorities empowered.
To educate and serve.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So anyways, that was started, I think, while I was there. I remember that happening. And I think there have been ways they've tried to go in a better direction, but like their roots have always been in white supremacy.
I found an online diary that a student of color wrote. I think it was January 2016. And he described just some of the most frustrating, not just microaggressions, they were macroaggressions. And I published it. I mean, it's out there. And then, of course, he took it down. I think I wrote him. I think I contacted him and said, look, you need to take this down because this isn't going to go well for you. Here are some people you can contact if you need help, off-campus people. But I was worried sick about him. And this is 16. This is under Pettit.
Wow. Yeah, I know. And
I can send that to you too.
Wow. Because like on the Surviving BJU podcast, I had an episode focused on people of color. There were just only two people who came forward. One of them anonymous, one of them public.
Those were good though. Those are good conversations.
I'm glad I was able to have them on. And one of them, it happened around like 2011-ish. Like that was 2010, 11-ish. So that was really bad. And then the other one, they were there during the time I was there.
That's right.
Yes. But yes, it's still,
it was the nursing student.
Yes, the nursing
The older
student.
one, the 2011 one. Yeah. He was just, and I'm not surprised that, what's her name? The nursing person.
Was it Crispin or I don't know.
Crispin.
Yeah. So I think everyone has always tried to say, oh, Bob Jones is changing. Bob Jones is changing.
It's all white people saying that though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is white people saying that.
Yeah, see, and it's probably usually often white ladies too. And we love to think everything's okay.
Yeah. And it was just, and even like with the Grace report with everything, then to have that student come forward for the Surviving BJU where they're still mishandling accusations of
Yeah,
sexual.
you proved that.
Yeah.
You proved it.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think one of the common things throughout the Surviving BJU podcast, I think Craig Vietti had said
Yeah.
this. He's like, if you expose the truth, this is paraphrasing, but if you expose the
Right.
truth of something and it falls apart, let it fall apart, let it
Right.
end.
Good witness.
Yeah, let it be gone.
It wasn't worth keeping.
And this never made it in the Greenville news article, which I wish it would have. When I just remember this saying this to the reporter. And I'll link the full article that's out now in the show notes. But I remember saying to her, I'm like, no, the Surviving BJU podcast has been about the harmful, awful experiences across all the years, different people's backgrounds across the board. And yet there are still people who will say, oh, quit focusing on that. Look at all the good that Bob Jones has done. And I'm like, but was it worth it though? Let's say Bob Jones has done good. Is it really worth it?
The good can be done elsewhere.
And the thing is, too,
if there's just a little bit of poison in your food,
no organization is perfect.
Oh, that.
No one's perfect. I get so tired of that because to me, like, there's a difference between mistakes and an abusive system of control.
If there's a difference, mistakes are fine. But you told us that you were special and you had, that aura of goodness is so impermeable.
Yeah. Yes. There's so much more to explore and expose about that place. But I know you have to go soon.
Yeah. This was fun though.
This was fun.
I know, and my battery's about to die too. So there's those two things. But we made it.
We made it. But yeah, thank you.
Well, you can talk more offline. And I'll send you all that stuff that I have.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
You're so great too.
And letting me talk about my obsession for the last 15 years.
Yeah. I feel like we could do this regularly. Have more things to talk about.
Yeah,
because I learned a bunch of things that I never knew about Bob Jones himself or about the college.
I'm glad.
So,
I'm glad. And I'll give you the data.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. I'll see you.
All right. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond BJU. It would be greatly appreciated if you could share this podcast with anyone you think that would find it interesting. This will help spread the word and help other survivors find the show just like you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond BJU. If you are listening on Apple Podcast or on Spotify, if you could leave a 5-star rating, this will help other listeners just like you discover the show. Thank you.